Hi, this is Emily of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, this is Jerry Strauss, host of Hollywood Happy Plays here on Public House Media. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. And once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Hollywood Happy Plays, where we talk with and about all of your favorite names from the worlds of TV, movies, music, whatever entertains you. We are getting up close and personal with those people right here on HHP. A new show comes out every 2 weeks, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Hollywood Happy Place. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Womack has saved the USA's life in this World Cup! Paul, the runner! Loose ball! It's good! Gonzaga! The slipper still fits!
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag! It gets through Buckner! Here comes Knight and the Mets win it! He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth!
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness! I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Welcome into the cheap seats, ladies and gentlemen, all the way up here where the opinions are as hot as the beer is cold. Christian Heimall with you in the Public House Media Network. We are so happy to be brought to you by Public House Media and joining you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the cheap seats. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker.com, and of course you can check out thephmedia.com where there's some awesome cheap seats gear that you can buy. And we have a very special guest host here today. Unfortunately, John Lauder not feeling the best this Monday, but we are happy to welcome the host of another tremendous podcast, part of Public House Media, Completely Serious, Ryan Piers joining us here. Ryan, thanks so much for stepping in and filling in here this week.
Christian, no problem. Josh does a great job, so I'll try to do my best, but thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and real quick, for those of our listeners who may not have had a chance yet to catch your show, tell them a little bit about it before we get going here.
Sure. Basic show, nothing too fancy. It's called Completely Serious, and the name's a bit of a play on words. It's not serious at all. It's a sports talk show where we have fun. The catchphrase is have fun and talk sports, and we talk about careers. We talk to media people, talk about their careers, and talk about the hot issues in the sport they are covering. We play some metaphorical games and joke around for about 20 minutes. It airs on Public House Media every 2 weeks, every Friday morning.
There we go. So a lot of fun to have you. And that's basically what we do in the cheap seats. We just have fun, talk sports. We give our unbridled opinions here on the cheap seats, and so we're happy to have you. And just a quick preview of what's up to come on the show. I mean, it is NFL Draft Week here, so the future of all 32 NFL teams could be drastically altered in just a couple of days in Dallas with the NFL Draft. And Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas, is going to join us here to talk about how the Big D is preparing to be the center of the NFL universe, what the Cowboys are looking to possibly do now that they've released Dez Bryant, and what teams like the Browns, the Giants, the Jets should be doing up in the top of the draft. We'll give you our input as well. We'll also touch on, of course, the NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs. But, Ryan, we're going to begin today in Major League Baseball, and there's some big headlines over the weekend. I think the first one to kind of note, just to make a quick little tidbit here, is yesterday, Sunday afternoon, Chris Bryant, the Cubs star third baseman, taking a 96-mile-an-hour fastball to the helmet against the Colorado Rockies. That was in the I believe it was the third, right at the start of the game, I believe. Yeah, third batter of the game, 96-mile-an-hour fastball right to the helmet. And here's what's amazing. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the video at all. First off, Bryant, no signs of a concussion. He's going to continue to be evaluated. But it looked, I don't know how he stayed on his feet during the entire time. That ball ricocheted right off the helmet, right off the visor, and he somehow stayed standing.
Yeah, I was watching kind of out of the corner of my eye yesterday while I was working. And when Bryant took that shot, I believe it was an 0-2 pitch, which obviously means it wasn't intentional.
Right.
But when he took that shot, I was stunned. He wasn't stunned. I was surprised he didn't go down on all fours. And I'm actually a Cubs fan myself, so I was immediately concerned. I mean, how valuable this guy is to the team as a base runner, hitter, defensive player. He really is immeasurable. And as you said, I mean, he got hit so hard that the helmet was rocked. And Bryant is such a tough player to start to go down. It means he got hit very hard. So I was surprised he did not go down on all fours, and he at least was able to walk up under his own power.
Yeah, and I mean, it's scary to think that stuff can kind of happen to anybody, obviously. I mean, it happens more often than we think in baseball, and you've seen Major League Baseball try to take steps to protect their players. You see guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Jason Hayward, they wear those softball type helmets now to protect the jaw as well. Of course, we all remember Stanton a couple of years ago, and a couple of pitchers have tried the hat that has extra padding on there, because we've seen 3 pitchers already this year get hit in the chest or in the head with comebackers. So they're doing everything they can to try, but at some point, I mean, I know we talk about football as a violent sport, and everybody says baseball is a non-contact sport, but oh my goodness, you see things like yesterday with Chris Bryant, and you realize just how dangerous the sport can actually be.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because football especially, there's movies about it, there's documentaries about the concern about concussions in football. And soccer, for soccer followers, there's a fair amount of concern there too. People don't talk as much about baseball, and maybe not to the extent of football, but there is a concern about concussions for this very reason. And when it's a player like Bryant, where he's young, he's got a long ways to go, you have to be extremely careful with it. And the game has made great strides and improvements with the protective headgear, as you mentioned. But these things, with the speed of the pitches now, it seems like I think every pitcher throws about 5 miles per hour faster than they did maybe 2 decades ago. Balls are hit harder. It just is a more dangerous game for that reason.
And you almost kind of wonder if there's more they can do. I mean, I mentioned Stanton and Hayward with those extended, basically chin guards with the helmet, but I wonder if there's ever going to be any real advocacy to go to maybe a full cage like they have like it's now mandatory in college softball. I almost wonder if that's something that we could be seeing coming in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, the Baseball Players Union would have to, I think, give way to that. I think a lot of pitchers, well, I guess in this case it'd be hitters too, a lot of players would be uncomfortable with it at first, but you mentioned it, that you are seeing the slight evolution of a helmet where it's not just guarding the top of your head.
Right.
It not just guarding the ear, it's guarding the cheek and the jawbone of whatever side is facing the pitcher. So we're kind of getting there. Really all they're missing is the mask part of it. Yeah. So I wouldn't be shocked if we get to that point.
Well, Major League Baseball's Player Union has a couple of other things to deal with first before we get to that point, I guess. And one of them being this increased talk over the last really 2 weeks now of shortening Major League Baseball's season. It's been discussed every now and again for the last couple of years. Last week on the Cheap Seats, it was a big conversation throughout the week on all 3 shows last week. But Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred coming out and saying, guys, don't forget that a shorter season means lower pay for the players. There's been talk about a 5% decrease in payroll for those players. And what Anthony Rizzo, so I was interested with the Cubs, Anthony Rizzo said that he would be willing to take a pay cut to play less games. And that I think is kind of impressive to see a player of Rizzo's caliber saying that he thinks Major League Baseball teams play too much. Says, I think playing in the cold sucks. As a fan, you're going to a baseball game in April and it's raining, snowing, and freezing rain. Is it really that much fun? That's my question. Yes, guys are going to take pay cuts, but we are playing this game for money, or do we love this game? I know it's both, but in the long run, it will make everything better. So, I mean, Anthony Rizzo, who is probably one of, I would say, maybe the 15 most popular players in Major League Baseball right now, to be able to say that, it kind of lends credence for the commissioner to think that it might actually be something that could happen in the near future.
Yeah, this is a fun topic, and I've even thought about going at it on my podcast as well. I think there's some sort of middle ground because being in the Midwest, you know how brutal April is. It's really not spring. It's like a spring winter, like a sprinter type thing. I don't know what the word would be. It's a combination of the two. We'll have 60s, 70s one day, and then 30s with snow the next day.
Right.
It is not fit for baseball. It's not just in the majors, but the Midwest League, the minor league, single A league, they're having snowouts almost every day right now, and it complicates their schedule as well because all those games are played in the Midwest. So there's got to be some sort of middle ground, I think. I don't know if the players will ever and the owners in the league will ever decrease from 162, but I think something's going to have to be done with playing in April because this leads to more double headers later on and more risk of injuries. Right. It's just tough for fans. Like you're waiting for your game to start, and every other day you're getting it snowed out, rained out, whatever it may be. I think there could be some sort of compromise to where maybe a cold weather team plays a lot more road games in the beginning and more home towards the end. I'm not sure what it is, or maybe play some games in Arizona like you do in spring training. I'm not sure, but I think something's going to have to budge at one point.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this Puerto Rico series over the weekend where I believe it was Minnesota and Cleveland went down to Puerto Rico and played a couple of games. Nothing wrong with having teams do that. If you want the game to really become more international, send a couple to Mexico, send some to Cuba, send some to Puerto Rico for a couple series. But that to me is the same. You're losing the same amount of money from an owner standpoint at the gate of ticket sales and concession sales. You're losing the same amount of money by playing in Puerto Rico as you would by taking those games off the schedule in general. So I think you can easily just take 100, I'm an advocate. I would love to see down to 148 games. I would get rid of 14 games. Get rid of 14 games. You don't need as many interleague matchups. You don't need as many interdivisional matchups. I mean, how many times do we really need to see the Cubs and Cardinals play? How many times do we really need to see the Red Sox and Yankees, the Dodgers and Giants? How many times do we really need to see that every single year, especially if they end up playing each other in the playoffs? It becomes almost boring at some point, especially in April and May, where, especially, I mean, you and I both live in the Midwest. I mean, I'm out here in Davenport, Iowa, where the Midwest League champion Quad City River Bandits have had maybe 8 people at all of their games total this year because it's been 30 degrees, snowing, and they're right on the river and the wind's blowing like crazy. So there's no reason why you can't just take some of these games off. And if the players are going to take a pay cut, you know what? Get a better agent to maybe backload your deal later in your career or get them more fully guaranteed. Maybe that's the way you do it. Maybe you fully guarantee some of these contracts more as opposed to giving incentives, like if you reach a certain amount of at-bats, then you get a bonus structure. So there are ways, there's definitely a middle ground there for these teams and these owners to be able to shorten Major League Baseball's season to improve not only the quality of play, but the fan experience as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's what I wasn't thinking about. You can add those points to a contract that it can make up for losing whatever cash it is that they're going to lose. I'd be fine with that. I think 148 is a good number. That's starting, like you said, the season 2 weeks later. Maybe get into mid-April when you get going. I think that'd be great. I'd be fine with that, and just kind of seeing how it plays out.
Maybe do a little bit longer spring training, which I think some people would be really excited for, especially if you're a pitcher, maybe ones who have kind of struggled as a starter at the beginning of the year and now have been moved to the bullpen. That kind of sounds like Matt Harvey of the New York Mets. That, by the way, in the business kids, that's what we call a segue.
Segue. Nicely done.
Matt Harvey, thank you, sir. The Mets stud pitcher from a couple of years ago who led them within just a couple of outs of a World Series championship has been relegated to the bullpen over the weekend, who has really struggled in his starting role over the last couple of years. Let's see here. Harvey's 0-2 with a 6 ERA so far this season, 26 innings over 4 starts. He's given up 26 hits, 4 home runs, and 4 walks. And this is a guy who a couple of years ago was a Cy Young finalist. He was 5-7 with a 6.70 ERA last year. 2013, obviously, All-Star. 2015 helped the Mets get to the World Series. Missed half of 2016 with surgery. So for him, this is kind of a reality check that his stuff just isn't there. And I thought it was interesting what he said to the media over the weekend. It's the decision they made. I have to suck it up and go out there and do everything I can to get things back in gear. So for a guy who was as loved as he was in 2013, 2015, for him to take this meteoric fall, it's almost kind of hilarious that his nickname really was the Dark Knight, because they made those jokes about you live long enough to see, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. He's basically become that.
So fitting. And pitching's such an interesting thing when you're a professional pitcher. Careers, the way they have their ebbs and flows, and how quickly they drop off. Matt Harvey, to me, is kind of like the East Coast version of Tim Lincecum, where he was so dominant one year, and then there's just that drastic decrease because of injury or endurance. Yeah. The difference to me, though, is Lincecum was 5'10", 5'11", and weighed maybe $160. Matt Harvey's a big guy with a lot of weight to throw behind his pitch. He can throw at good pace. He just lost control and lost stability, which is what's kind of surprising. I know Matt's always been a bit of a head case, too, which I think that kind of plays into it. But it really is stunning to see a pitcher like Harvey where, yes, he had injuries, but he was still relatively young. It wasn't like he was your expected ace. I mean, he can come out and be the number 3, number 4 pitcher, and they can experiment with him and see how he plays in the rotation. Yet, obviously, there's such a high level of distrust in him that he can't even break that starting 5.
And it's so strange to see this, considering, I mean, the Mets, that's all they've been talking about for the last 4 years has been their young starting rotation, with how talented it's going to be with guys like Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Steven Matz, Zach Wheeler. There's so many names there for this Mets squad, and Harvey was supposed to be at the front end of that rotation, and now to have him sent to the bullpen, it's definitely a reality check for him, but at the same time, it could be a blessing in disguise for the Mets. I mean, think a couple of years ago, that World Series that they lost, one of the big reasons the Royals won that World Series was a guy named Wade Davis, who, by the way, was a starter before he floundered into becoming a setup man, a dominant setup man. There's nothing wrong with being that as long as you can. It's not necessarily, and this is where it gets kind of annoying for athletes. It's not about, you got to put your ego aside. If you can't do the job you want to do the job you have to do, to at least help the team. And that's where I think a lot of fans get kind of annoyed, and with the fact that athletes can't understand that second part.
And I think what Matt has to do, the Mets are off to a great start. Their starting rotation looks really good without him right now, at least without him pitching well. They are going to be a contending team in a pretty good division the way Philly and Atlanta have been playing, and that the Nationals are going to get better.
Yep.
They're going to need some bullpen help. They're going to need a long relief guy. They're going to need maybe a good setup guy in Matt Harvey. If he accepts that role, he could really help this team make a push for the postseason and possibly farther, with a lot of National League top squads having some questions to answer. But he's going to have to drop his ego. You're right. He's going to have to look in the mirror and say, this is who I am right now. This is what I have to do to help the team.
And I tell you what, if he doesn't, he could be one of those guys shipped out in a trade deadline move that helps the Mets possibly compete for a playoff spot later in the year. So we'll see exactly what happens there with Matt Harvey and the New York Mets. We'll cover it, of course, all throughout the season. There's a number of places you can check it out on Public House Media. Of course, you got the cheap seats here. You've got Press Row with me every single week. And then you've got Ryan Piers, of course, our co-host here today, completely serious, every other Friday on Public House Media. We still got a bunch to get to. When we return, Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas, is going to join us. The NFL Draft coming up on Thursday. What will the Browns do with their top picks? How is Dallas preparing for all of this? And just my New York Giants are going to give me an ulcer. I just know it. It's going to bother the crap out of me. We'll get to our poll question, our Mojo Monday, and plenty of other stuff coming up. Ryan Piers guest hosting along with myself, Christian Heimall, here this week. It's Monday, April 23rd. You're in the cheap seats.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Back in the cheap seats on Public House Media, Christian Heimall here with you, along with guest host Ryan Piers, on this Monday, April 23rd, 2018. The NFL Draft upon us, just a couple of days away. We'll be in Dallas, and Ryan, I don't know if you saw this, but a couple of days ago, I saw NFL Live on ESPN doing a redraft of 2013. And it got me thinking, what's a bigger waste of time or what's dumber? And this is actually our poll question. If you go to the Cheap Seats by Public House Media Facebook page, our poll question for today, what's dumber when it comes to the NFL draft, mock drafts or redrafts? So we'll give, Ryan and I will give our opinions in a little bit, but I want to welcome in Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas. And Mike, I guess we'll start there. In your opinion, what's a bigger waste of time when it comes to the NFL draft? Is it these mock drafts that make Todd McShay and Mel Kiper's hair famous, or is it these redrafts that we do 4 or 5 years later?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the mock drafts, I don't know what value they really have, because trying to predict what's going to happen even 6 to 8 picks into one of these drafts is difficult to do, let alone getting through all 32 picks in the first round. Obviously, there are some guys that are better at it than others, that hit with greater success than others, but it's not like I think of when they do the bracketology for ESPN for the NCAA basketball tournament. Mm-hmm. That they seem to be relatively accurate with. The mock drafts don't seem to be.
So then let's just be one of them then. I mean, Cleveland there with number 1 and number 4. There's been so much talk about Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen over the last couple of weeks, but realistically, who should the Cleveland Browns be taking at number 1 overall?
Are we saying that it has to be a quarterback? Because
No. I'm saying who should they take number 1 overall?
Okay, then I'm saying Saquon Barkley. That's my answer. I don't look at any of these quarterbacks and see that Andrew Luck type, no doubter, he's going to change the franchise kind of guy. And obviously Luck's been injured the last couple of years and it's been a little bit shaky. But at least his first few years and when he was coming out into the draft, he was seen as that slam dunk, no doubt he's going to be a franchise changing quarterback. I don't see that guy in this draft. The best player I see in this draft is Barkley. I mean, and then you go to the other side of the ball. A guy like Bradley Chubb is another guy that I think you could rest assured is going to be successful in this league.
How reliant, though, because it's the Cleveland Browns and Tim Couch, Johnny Manziel. I mean, with so many other names, we could go down the list for hours here. But how much of it is pressure to have that franchise quarterback, even though they have a guy in Tyrod Taylor who's had less interceptions the last 3 years than Deshaun Kaiser had all of last season?
Yeah, if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm looking at that situation saying, forget about trying to draft a quarterback. Tyrod Taylor's not bad. Continue to build up that defense. I wouldn't mind. I mean, if you can create a situation where you've got Bradley Chubb on one side, I mean, the defensive front that you can create there could be pretty scary. That, to me, seems to be a more advantageous situation for them and something that's a little bit more reliable for a franchise that has been burned in the draft so many times. I kind of got to imagine Browns fans are going, hey, go with the sure thing. And none of these quarterbacks to me look like a sure thing.
Speaking with Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas, and with the NFL draft coming up, Mike, down there in your guys' town, what's been the preparations like? How are things shaping up? How's the city responding to being able to do what Chicago and Philly have the last couple of years?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of excitement. It's definitely going to be a very cool week. And that's the craziest thing is it's turning into an entire week-long process, not just that Thursday, Friday, Saturday. The days leading up are going to be interesting. It's really been an exciting process even in the weeks leading up to the draft itself. So it's been a lot of build-up, a lot of excitement, and once we actually get to those 3 days, it's going to be bedlam out there at the stadium. It's going to be a really unique event. They host a lot of cool things. They've had a lot of interesting things come through AT&T Stadium. It's definitely one of those places that any big event that does move from place to place to place, AT&T Stadium is kind of on that list of, hey, we should make sure we hit that spot. So there have been some cool things that have come through here. But this will probably be at least maybe the most unique thing that has come through AT&T Stadium. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
You know me. You've known me for almost a decade now, a little over a decade, and you know that being a New York Giants fan has had its highs and lows over the last 10 years. And yet somehow, some way, this offseason could not have started out better with the firing of Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese, the hiring of Dave Gettleman. And yet, for whatever reason, with the signing of Nate Solder, the signing of the trade for Alec Ogletree, the signing of Jonathan Stewart, this team is built to win now, and yet somehow, someway, I just have this feeling the Giants are drafting Eli's replacement at number 2, which is going to give me an aneurysm. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me, please. First off, tell me I'm wrong, and then tell me why I'm wrong.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think you're wrong to hope that they don't do that. I do think that it's possible that you're wrong that they do that. I do think it's possible that they go ahead and take Barkley at number 2, and that would be, I think, the right decision. We already discussed before, and my opinion, he's the guy in this draft. He's the no doubter. He's the guy who's going to be a big time NFL player out of this. I mean, not the only one, but I think he's the one that you can rely on most to be that top end franchise changing type talent that you need to select if you're picking this high in the draft. So I do think it's possible that you're wrong in terms of, I think they could go a different direction. I think you're absolutely right to hope that they don't draft a quarterback because, as we talked about before, none of these guys look to me to be that guy. Darnold's got some tools. He's got some talent. I question both him and Josh Allen in terms of the mental makeup. Baker Mayfield is a completely different kind of mental makeup conversation, but also there are questions there. It's just in a different way. And I don't think any of them look to me like they are the slam dunk talent that you want at the time. I mean, this has been the reality in the NFL for several years. We see this happen every year in the draft.
Right.
Quarterbacks go higher than they should, higher than they need to, because teams need them so badly. It is still a quarterback-driven league, but none of these guys seem to be that guy. None of these guys seem to be, as you said it, Eli Manning's replacement. So, yeah, I think they would be much better served to go with Saquon Barkley, put him in the backfield. And, yeah, Eli's getting toward the back end of his career, and he's got an offensive line in front of him that doesn't seem like they can do anything right. And no matter how many talented skill players you have, if you don't have people that can move people, your other people can't do anything. But still, you put Saquon Barkley on a team with Odell Beckham Jr. and, hey, maybe Des Bryant soon, and Evan Ingram at the tight end position. That seems to me like a talented offensive group that could do some things, even without an offensive line doing a whole heck of a lot. So that could be an interesting offense if they do indeed draft Barkley.
Mike, let's say Barkley does go number 1 and the Browns pick him up right away. Who is the guy you think the Giants should look to? I mean, there's about 4 quarterbacks that are pretty comparable. Is there one that you think does step out? And I'll ask kind of a second part of this question too. What do you think maybe the projected ceiling, or what do you think that number 1 quarterback that's going to be taken, where do you think he's going to land in terms of the projected NFL talent? Like, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, or do you think there's really not a top 5 one here?
Yeah,
We're thinking maybe 5 to 15.
Guy in this draft that's that level, that's that top 5 quarterback. Honestly, if I were to look at all of them, the one that I think has got the best chance to be successful in this league, it's Mayfield, because I think that the comparisons to Johnny Manziel on the football field make some sense, but I think he's more gifted than that. I think that he's more, maybe gifted's not the right word, because Manziel was certainly gifted in terms of what he could do on the football field, but he couldn't get his head straight off the field. I think the comparisons off the field aren't especially fair to Mayfield because, yes, he's had some issues. Yes, he's as cocksure as they come, but I feel like they're a different kind of issue in that regard. And I think that Manziel's concerns are certainly more present than Mayfield's are. I don't think that I would bet my franchise on any of these quarterbacks, but if there were one that I had to choose, I think Mayfield would probably be the guy because he, at the very least, seems like a guy who will do absolutely everything to win a football game. I don't know that I see that in Darnold or in Rosen. They don't see, especially Rosen. It just doesn't seem like the guy that's headlong into football and all he wants to do is get better at the game and be a film rat. And I don't get that read off of Rosen. I don't know that I get that read that much off of Darnold. Mayfield seems like the guy that is, of any of these guys, most focused, most, to use the old Ray Lewis, pissed off for greatness. Baker Mayfield, to me, if any of these guys fits that category, it's Baker Mayfield. And I think you need some of that regardless of position just to have any success in this league. So if I had to bet on any of these guys, Mayfield would be the guy.
Is there anybody that may go 10 to 20? They're projected to go between 10, 20, maybe 10 to 25 right now. That you think this guy could actually be something really special in the NFL?
You know, the name that everybody keeps on talking about possibly slipping is Derwin James. Initially, he was being projected as a top 6, 7, 8 pick. I keep on seeing these mock drafts that are dropping him down to 12 or to 14 or to 16. And I know a lot of folks here in Dallas are keeping tabs on that because they want to see him fall all the way to 19. And frankly, if he does, given the Cowboys' needs at safety, yeah, they would jump all over Derwin James if he were to drop that far. I think that's probably a little bit of wishful thinking on Cowboys fans' part that he's going to drop that far. But I think it is possible that he could go somewhere in that 11, 12, 13 range. And if that ends up being the case, I mean, Cleveland needs some help in the secondary. I'm looking at one mock draft that has them picking a corner, not a safety. But, if he goes in somewhere in that range, he's certainly somebody that looks like he could be a pretty legitimate talent at the NFL level.
Christian Heimall, Ryan Piers here in the cheap seats, joined by Mike Leslie, WFAA in Dallas. Mike, you mentioned the Cowboys fans down there. You mentioned Dez Bryant a little bit earlier. The first question here is, what was the reaction in Dallas last week when the announcement was made that they were going to cut Dez Bryant, that apparently, Dez's remarks that it was Garrett's guys who wanted him out. He then goes and says he wants to stay in the NFC East. Two parts here, I guess. Number one, what was the reaction like from Cowboys fans about Dez Bryant being, gone from this team? And then two, where do you see him most likely landing?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the reaction here was, put it this way. He is not necessarily the most successful athlete that DFW has ever seen. He's had some success, don't get me wrong, but you think of the hierarchy of athletes in this area over the history of the Cowboys, the Mavericks, the Rangers, he's done some things. He's caught a bunch of touchdown passes. He's been a really good player in this league, but he hasn't won anything. But even with that being the case, he is one of the most popular athletes in this area. I think of current athletes, obviously now he's no longer a current DFW athlete, but I think if you were, a week and a half ago, still putting him in that category of current DFW athletes, he was, I think, maybe second to Dirk in terms of popularity. Wow. He is extremely popular and extremely well-liked around the area by Dallas Cowboys fans. Now, he's got some warts, too. That's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
But at least in terms of what their reaction was to his departure, to him being cut, there was a lot of there were a lot of very angry Cowboys fans, for sure. There were a lot of fans that were saying, hey, I'm just going to follow Dez. Wherever he goes, that's going to be my new team. Now that I don't think that goes across the board by any means. There are certainly some Cowboys fans that were, hey, you know what? He had turned into a headache. Get rid of him. There were people on either side of the spectrum for sure. But there were a lot of fans that really, really, really loved Dez Bryant and still do and are completely on the Dez Bryant train more so than they ever were on the Dallas Cowboys train. And I think some of that comes from the fact that, frankly, this franchise hasn't been as successful over the course of the last 2 decades. It's been 22 years now since they won a championship. Back in the day when this team was always in the playoffs, constantly in the NFC Championship game, and very regularly winning and going to Super Bowls, the star was the end-all, be-all. The star was what it was all about. You were a Cowboys fan for that generation. The last 20 years, what's the total at now? 4, I think, playoff wins, 3 playoff wins since they last made it to the Super Bowl. There are a lot of Cowboys fans that love Tony Romo and that love Jason Witten and that love Dez Bryant and are more so fans of those individuals than they are fans of the Dallas Cowboys and that mystique, because frankly, that mystique hasn't been there in a really long time. So yeah, the reaction to Dez Bryant leaving was strong, to put it bluntly. As for where he goes, I think it would be very interesting if he went to New York. I think he and Odell are having an awful lot of fun with their Instagram feeds and just kind of teasing fans right now. I don't know how realistic that is necessarily, although I did find it interesting when Dave Gettleman was asked about it, the Giants GM was asked about it earlier this week, or I should say last week, and he had this kind of slow, low, guttural laugh, and they just kind of, hey, we're interested in everybody. We're interested. We'll look at every. It was almost part demonic, part kind of just sneaky, underhanded. Like, hey, we'll do whatever we need to do. It would be awfully interesting. I did see that the Ravens were interested in him as well, which I thought it was kind of interesting. This has followed a very similar script to when I was in Charlotte and the Panthers got rid of Steve Smith.
Yeah,
and Smitty went to Baltimore. It would be interesting if it followed the exact same script that Dez Bryant would follow suit and go to Baltimore. I do think that Dez has got a lot left in the tank, not in the way that he necessarily played the first half of his career. He can't run a whole heck of a lot anymore. He's not getting a whole lot of separation. But could he move inside, be a slot guy, and be Anquan Bolden for 4 or 5 years? I think that's possible.
Mike, we really appreciate it, buddy. Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas. It's been fun chatting with you again, and enjoy this week. I mean, it's Jerry's world, and we're living in it this week. So
it is the truth, 1,000%. Sometimes, unfortunately, but yes, we are definitely just living in Jerry's world, and we will certainly be doing that this week.
Mike Leslie,
Mike, my fault, Christian. I just want to jump in real quick. Mike, I was in Chicago when the Bears in Chicago hosted the draft for 2 years. It is something impressive. The cities love it. So I'm really excited for Dallas. I think you guys can do a great job.
Yeah, no, I had the opportunity to be there for that, just for day one of that draft, because that was the year the Cowboys were picking fourth, and they took Zeke Elliott in that draft. So we went up there with the Cowboys picking fourth and figuring it was going to be either Zeke Elliott or Jalen Ramsey, the corner that ended up going to Jacksonville with the next pick. And so I got a small taste of what it was like in Chicago for about 24 hours. We were in and out, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the full weekend and how it all plays out and what it's like to see the draft from beginning to end. So we're definitely looking forward to it.
Enjoy it, my friend. Good to talk with you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas. We'll be back in just a minute here on the Cheap Seats. Break it down here on Public House Media.
I'm the Greg.
And I am Dave Show.
We host the Greg and Dave Show on Public House Media.
Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out our show, The Greg and Dave Show, where we talk about strange, bizarre, and sometimes just downright quirky news stories that you may not have heard about.
A new show comes out every Wednesday. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes. And hey, thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Back on the Cheap Seats, Christian Heimall here with you. Guest host Ryan Piers with me as well. Host of Completely Serious on Public House Media. Don't forget to check that out every other Wednesday. You can subscribe to all of our shows, including mine, Press Row, which you hear every Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker.com, and, of course, thephmedia.com, where we've got some great swag for all of our podcasts as well. I'm sure Ryan, even though he's making a guest spot here in the Cheap Seats, is probably rocking his Completely Serious swag right now. It's got his name on it and everything. It's awesome.
I love the swag. Yeah, it's impressive. When Baxter Colburn told me about it, I'm like, we have swag, we have cups, we have mugs and T-shirts and sweatshirts, but it's impressive. It looks nice. All the shows really do. They did a good job with it. So it's the swag is well done.
And doesn't yours actually have your name on it? Like it's
got my name on it.
I
was very surprised.
See, I don't have that on Press Row. We don't have that on the Cheap Seats, so that's awesome.
You should push for that. Yeah, maybe get your name on it. I was surprised. Like my name is on a T-shirt. That's so bizarre. Now I don't know if it's been bought yet, And I've met, if anybody wants to buy a shirt, if anybody buys some completely serious swag or any swag, how about that? If anybody buys some Public House Media swag and you message me on Facebook, I will buy your next swag from Public House Media for you.
There you go.
It is really cool.
I like that. Buy one, get one from Ryan Piers.
Exactly.
I like that. That's
Exactly.
pretty awesome. All right, we just had Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas, joining us. The NFL Draft coming up on Thursday. I thought it was kind of interesting. I've known Mike for 10 years, and to hear him say basically the exact opposite of what everybody else is saying, that there isn't a franchise-changing quarterback in this draft, is really intriguing to me. Considering how much we've been told that like Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen are the type of guys that you can't whiff on because you'd be set for the next 10 years if you drafted one of those guys. I thought that was probably the most interesting thing there.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. That was definitely a hot take. He brought out the take there. And I think it's surprising, although he could be completely right. You never know. With all these quarterbacks, there might not be. And you don't get the sense there is a stud quarterback. I mean, the past couple of years, we thought, okay, Goff, Wentz, those guys felt like studs. Nobody here, and maybe this is what he's getting at, feels like a stud. But the thought is, okay, we have 5 guys that could probably be top 15, top 20 quarterbacks in this draft, or top 20 picks in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
The odds are one of these guys is going to get put in the right situation for them. The odds are one of them is going to be good enough to be a franchise-changing quarterback just because, pure numbers, there's 5 guys that could very well go in the top 20.
But I tell you what, I do agree with him on 100%. And I've been on this train for 2 years now. Baker Mayfield's the best quarterback in this draft. Mm-hmm. I love Baker. I think he's a more mobile Drew Brees. That's honestly what I think about him. He's the same exact size, same height and weight. He's got that arm. He's got that mental aspect of it that is just impressive. But he's a little bit more mobile. He's a bit more of a scrambler. And I would love to see him fall to that point where the Saints draft him as Drew Brees' replacement. But that won't happen. He's not going to fall all the way down into the 20s. I firmly believe, I would not be surprised at all, especially if the Browns do take Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen at number 1, Baker Mayfield goes number 3 to the Jets. That would not surprise me in the least. Baker in New York would be unbelievable as long as it's in Jets green and not my Giants blue. That's all I really care about. Because don't get me wrong, I would buy a Baker Mayfield Giants jersey, but I do not want them drafting a quarterback at number 2.
Yeah, and I think a lot of owners and GMs are thinking the same way you and Mike are. When you look at a quarterback now, arm strength is good, decision making is good, but you have to be mobile. The game has become an air attack game. Running backs, they catch the ball in the backfield. Quarterbacks have to roll out of the pocket more often. There's more options. There's more of a college-infused style of play, and quarterbacks have to be able to move out of the pocket. I think the days of Peyton Manning, who was more of a standstill quarterback with good footwork but wasn't super mobile, are in the past. I think Tom Brady isn't the most mobile quarterback, but he's survived in part because Bill Belichick's done such a good job playing to his strengths. Now, those kind of quarterbacks I don't think fare as well as somebody like a Drew Brees or a Russell Wilson or maybe a Carson Wentz like we've seen. I think Baker Mayfield, out of anybody, fits that mold the best.
Yeah, you're right. Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, those two have the most mobility, and they have the best option of really succeeding in today's NFL. Now, Rosen, Allen, Darnold, they're your prototypical quarterback, stand in the pocket, fire a good pass kind of guys. But there's something about and Mike's absolutely the pissed off for greatness line should be on his jersey. It shouldn't say Mayfield. It should just say pissed off for greatness, because that's Baker Mayfield. That's what I got from him throughout his entirety at Oklahoma. So, that's huge there. And then, you look at this. This draft could go sideways real quick. If the Browns take, let's say the Browns take like Quentin Nelson or Bradley Chubb number 1, and then the Giants have to make a decision of do they go and get a quarterback or Saquon Barkley, and then they go and get him there. And then the next thing you know, you could have teams that weren't in a position to get a quarterback start trading up to maybe try and get a quarterback because things just went sideways. So, and that's what I love about the draft is there's all these mock drafts. You can tell, and again, our poll question, if you go to the Cheap Seats by Public House Media, bigger waste of time, mock drafts or redrafts? For me, the bigger waste of time is mock drafts, because we never know what's going to happen. You don't know what the inner conversations are in those rooms. You don't know, as much as you can try to think what these teams need, you don't know what they actually want. How long were we told that Johnny Manziel was going to be a Dallas Cowboy? Like, how long were we told that? How long were we told that Aaron Rodgers was going to be like the first quarterback taken, and he falls all the way to 24th? the mock drafts mean nothing. They're as stupid as preseason polls, in my opinion. So it's like this draft could go so sideways so quick. But, I mean, it's just unbelievable how that could happen, especially if the Browns – there's talk the Browns could take quarterbacks at 1 and 4. Like, how dumb is that? Like, that's why I can't stand mock drafts.
I go off your first point. If the Browns took anybody but a quarterback in the first pick, even Saquon Barkley, that would be throwing a grenade on this draft. It would explode, and everybody would have to react. If they took Bradley Chubb or Quentin Nelson, the best lineman by far and away in this draft with that number 1 pick, I don't know if Nelson's the best option. I think Bradley Chubb would be a fine pick at number 1. I wouldn't do it. I was
Myles Garrett. Oh my God!
Yeah, you put those two together. The NFL is a pass rushing league. You still get your quarterback at number 4, at least a good quarterback at number 4. I think they're going quarterback. I think they have 5 options here, 3-4 options. They're going to take their guy at number 1, and they probably are going to get either a Barkley or a Chubb at number 4, and they know that. So I think they're taking quarterback 1. But if they don't, that would be so exciting to see what everybody else does. And going off your point, you guys, you and Mike have taken the mock drafts over the kind of rewind drafts, the redo drafts. You've done the other way. You prefer the redo drafts as opposed to the mock drafts. I'm gonna flip it. And I think your line of reasoning is correct, but I'm gonna pick a different one. I like mock drafts because they hype me up for a draft. They get me excited. They get me into it. The redrafts just remind me of how bad of a pick my team made. Because let's say my team picks at 10, the redraft he always goes at 20, and I just get so frustrated. So I think the redraft serves more of a purpose because the better evaluator of what a player has done in their career, as opposed to, as you I think, very perfectly compared the mock draft. The mock draft just does not have that much value. But for the sake of how much it frustrates me, I'm going to take the mock draft over the redraft.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, the redrafts, like, here's my issue with the redrafts. It's like, okay, first off, that's not how it happens, so why are we redrafting in the first place? Secondly, like, no offense to guys like Tim Couch and Ryan Leaf, because they always get thrown under the bus in these things, but it's not always where they were picked, but the team they were picked by. Like, Ryan Leaf was not in a good position in San Diego. Tim Couch was not in a good position in Cleveland. You know, Peyton Manning was a once-in-a-generation player in Indianapolis, and somehow he made it work. You know, I mean, look at Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning were swapped at 1 and 4. So what's to make you think that, like, if we did a redraft now that would still happen, that the Giants would still get Eli Manning in that trade on draft day? So it's both of them are dumb in my opinion, but the mock draft is just another level of stupid. So, but you're right though. It does kind of get us hyped up because it gets us at least talking about it. Because in my opinion, if I were to put a mock draft together, literally it would be Saquon Barkley at number 1, Quentin Nelson at 2, Baker Mayfield at 3, Bradley Chubb at number 4, and then just watch all hell break loose and see what happens. So I would love to see that. That'd be amazing. But who knows how it's actually going to play out?
It'd be crazy.
Who knows? Yeah. So who knows how it's all going to play out? Big thanks once again to Mike Leslie, WFAA-TV in Dallas, for joining us here. First round of the NFL draft is Thursday night. We'll be watching, of course. It's going to be a lot of fun. When we return, we'll take a quick look at the NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs, as well as our Mojo Monday. Ryan Piers sitting in for John Lauder. I'm Christian Heimall. You're in the cheap seats.
This is Nicole Kelly, host of Loud and Proud here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Loud and Proud, where we talk about issues facing the disability community. A new show comes out weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Loud and Proud. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Last few moments here in the cheap seats on Public House Media. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker.com. Of course, you can check us out, thephmedia.com, where you can also visit the store, get some cheap seats swag, and wear what the pros wear, as they say. Christian Heimall, along with guest host Ryan Piers, the host of Completely Serious on Public House Media, joining us here this Monday, April 23rd. And Ryan, it's playoff time, you know, so it's a lot of fun here. NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs, some of the best times of the year, and we've already got some interesting things going on. We'll start in the NBA playoffs, where first and foremost, the New Orleans Pelicans with a 4-0 sweep, 6-3 over Portland. They move on. They will face Golden State in the second round. And then you look at the big one to me, which is still interesting. Of course, you've got Cleveland and Indiana because the Cavaliers are in trouble. I don't care what anybody says. They are in a lot of trouble. And then you've got Boston, Milwaukee, where the Bucks have won both games on their home floor. Now it goes back to Boston, tied 2 games apiece after the Bucks almost blew a 20-point lead on Sunday for the Celtics to come all the way back. This is the exciting time of the year, and so far, realistically, other than maybe 2 series with New Orleans, Portland, and of course Golden State, San Antonio, NBA playoffs have been off to a fun start.
Oh, they've had a great week. And even the New Orleans blowout sweep of Portland was fun just to watch the Pelicans play with their team in the playoff rondo. But the Eastern Conference, and you brought it up, with Cleveland in trouble and Milwaukee coming back to even up that series against Boston, I think there is, to an extent, maybe a changing of the guard. It's moving away from the LeBron East, and Cleveland still may come out with this, but it's moving away from the LeBron East to an East led by Giannis Antetokounmpo, but more specifically the Embiid and Simmons combination in Philadelphia, and maybe even Victor Oladipo in Indiana. There are new stars, young stars, finally. It feels like it's been forever since some new stars emerged in the Eastern Conference, and they're taking over, and we're seeing that change of the guard, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
It's definitely one of the best parts about this is that we get to see those young. I mean, Donovan Mitchell in Utah has been. I mean, who would have thought that the Utah Jazz, when they got rid of Gordon Hayward, would be in this position come the postseason? But Ricky Rubio, Donovan Mitchell is playing great. I mean, it's been a lot of fun to watch. The process is finally coming to fruition in Philadelphia. So this is definitely a good time to be an NBA fan. And I think this is what the NBA needed, a playoffs like this where you could legitimately have the Cavaliers out in the first round. And New Orleans, if they had DeMarcus Cousins healthy, I would seriously consider them a threat to Golden State in the second round.
Oh, sure. I don't know how Golden State would stop those two down low. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if Golden State has the bigs to handle the combination of Davis, Mirotic, and some of the bigs that the Pelicans can throw at them. You made a great point. The NBA right now is so loaded with talent. That's obvious. But there's been this stagnation of LeBron versus Golden State, Cavaliers versus Warriors, or LeBron versus the Spurs when he was with Miami. There haven't been a new crop of teams to come through. And even though the talent's been there, we haven't had that excitement of new teams coming up and maybe challenging for the championship. And I think this year we're actually seeing that. And it may turn out to be Houston, it may turn out to be the Pelicans, maybe a Toronto, or even a Philadelphia. But somebody different, I think, is going to come out with maybe a championship or at least get to the finals. So I think that's big for the NBA.
Definitely is, and it's what makes it a lot of fun. Now, I don't think there's any debate on this one of which playoff system is better, the NHL or the NBA. I mean, the Stanley Cup playoffs, there's something special about it. And we got 2 games tonight here. Game 6 is Boston and Toronto, Washington at Columbus. Both road teams looking to close out the series. The Capitals, I mean, this series has been insane. 3 of the first 5 games have gone to overtime or double OT between Washington and Columbus. The Caps fell down 0-2. They're looking to win 4 straight and advance into the second round. Meanwhile, the Bruins trying to hold off a pesky Toronto squad that a lot of people thought would be a big-time upset candidate here. This is why I love the NHL playoffs, is because every single shift, it feels like drains you emotionally.
Oh, at any second, things can change. And that is why the NHL playoffs are so exciting. It is that at any moment in the hockey game, somebody could completely change things, whether it be a line shift or a play that leads to a quick goal. And it just flips the series around. It can flip the whole entire narrative of a playoff. And I think we've seen that a couple times. You brought them up over the past, week and a half since the playoffs started. It's been, like the NBA, a really fun opening couple weeks of the NHL playoffs.
It's so much fun. And the only thing that's better than Game 6 is Game 7. So, I mean, I'm kind of hoping to see a couple of Game 7s here. I know we've already got some going on, but it's a great time to be a sports fan. It really is. You've got baseball, you've got the NFL draft, you've got both NBA and NHL playoffs in full swing, and a lot of fun. So getting ready to wrap up the show here this week, this Monday, April 23rd on the Cheap Seats Public House Media. Guest host Ryan Piers, the host of Completely Serious, joining me, Christian Heimall, here with you guys. And Ryan, as always, every Monday we do our Mojo Monday, whether it's some good or some bad mojo, a player or a team, or really just anything going on. Since you are the guest here, I'll give you the honors to go first with your Mojo Monday.
Yeah, we'll keep it good. The New Orleans Pelicans, we just talked about them. The way they played over the past week against the Portland Trail Blazers, a Pelicans team that a lot of people didn't think would even make the playoffs. It wasn't just that they won by a sweep. There's players that evolved. And I think that's my favorite part is when you see an athlete reach his potential and kind of say, hey, I'm here. And I think we saw that a little bit with Nikola Mirotic, but more significantly with Drew Holiday, a player that's had injuries in his career, a player that's underperformed, a guy who works hard and plays good defense, scored 41 points in that game 4. Finally seeing this guy let the world know who he is. And I thought that was a lot of fun. So Drew Holiday and the Pelicans are my Mojo Monday.
All right, I like it. I'm going to go to the NFL here, and I'm going to go Andrew Luck. Not because he's not because he's actually throwing the ball, because we don't know if he actually is throwing a legitimate football. But he's got some good mojo because the Indianapolis Colts, of course, last week traded down in the draft. They went over the weekend and they traded their 3rd pick to the New York Jets to go down to number 6. That to me signals that the Colts are not drafting a quarterback, which means they are incredibly confident that Andrew Luck will be the starting quarterback for Indianapolis in 2018. So when your GM is willing to give up the number 3 overall pick and potentially take, as we've heard, many of these franchise-changing quarterbacks, one of them, that to me signals they're not going quarterback here. Now I could be completely wrong, and the Jets just gave them a really good deal for whatever reason, and and they think they can still get their franchise quarterback at number 6, but to me, this says that they are really confident in how Andrew's progressing through his recovery and that he will be the starting quarterback week 1 this fall.
Yeah, and I think that's a great pick. And that, to me, was probably the biggest news out of the week because we've been waiting so long for Luck to kind of get that chance to come back and be healthy. And there was questions that he may not be able to for Indianapolis. And now they're saying, hey, here's our guy. We're going to let him go, and we're going to pick somebody else to complement him. I think that was a big saying by the Colts.
Huge move for them. The NFL draft coming up on Thursday. Our Wednesday show will have a complete preview of it, and our Friday guys will hopefully have a big breakdown of the first round as well. Ryan Piers, the host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Ryan, thanks so much for jumping in here this Monday, filling in here in the cheap seats.
Yeah, Christian, I had a ton of fun. Thank you for inviting me. It was great.
All right, my pleasure, buddy. Welcome back anytime. That's going to do it for us here on this Monday, April 23rd. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker.com, of course, thephmedia.com. Go there, get yourself some awesome cheap seat swag. Get some completely serious swag as well. Ryan said he'll buy you the next one if you go and buy one there as well. So we'll make that happen. Don't forget to go to our Facebook page, The Cheap Seats by Public House Media. You can vote on our poll question, bigger waste of time in the NFL, mock drafts, or redrafts. Make your voice heard. And as always, guys, we really do appreciate you joining us here on Public House Media. For Ryan Piers, I'm Chris Heimall. We'll see you next time in the cheap seats.